A major theme of this season of the RNL show will be over the battle for the future of women, whether women will be further enslaved and degraded or emancipated. And this is a crucial fault line in the larger fight for a real revolution and the emancipation of humanity.
Sunsara, as a part of this, we're going to bring an interview to our audience that you did with Merle Hoffman that zeroes in on the fight for abortion rights. But first, we want to share and reflect a little bit on a short excerpt from the interviews that we spoke of earlier that we did with Bob Avakian on this question that sets the right context for why we're going to be taking up the fight for the liberation of women as a core part of the emancipation of humanity this season on the RNL show. So let's watch this interview with Bob Avakian.
I will say, just on a personal note, that for me, in my own development as a revolutionary and communist, I would say it has been a lifelong process of a continually deepening understanding of the horrific nature of the oppression of women, but also the pivotal and central role of the struggle for the emancipation of women in the overall communist revolution to emancipate all humanity from every form of oppression and exploitation. So, this really is, crucial in the whole struggle. There is not going to be any liberating struggle, any liberating real revolution that doesn't have right at the heart of it, at the core of it, the emancipation of women from every way in which they're degraded and debased and oppressed and, violently suppressed. And, this is a lot of struggle. Now, look, I talked about backward shit that people are into, but there also are, positive things where, not only among young women, but even some of the young men, including among the oppressed, have taken a better stand on this because they can identify at least on as a first step, beginning basis, they can identify with people who are being oppressed, and then sometimes it's there's more largeness of mind involved. They don't want oppression of any kind, as much as they understand that. They're against it. So there's contention out there. But, in order, like I said, in order to have this revolution, this has to be at the core of it. It's not the only form of oppression. It has to be uprooted, obviously, but it is right at the core of transforming the whole world. This historic and, thousands of year old oppression of women in different forms in different societies, and it's been completely bound up with the division of society overall into masters and slaves, into oppressors and oppressors, exploiters and exploiters. You go back in history, it's completely bound up with that and has run through every form of oppression and exploitation, going back to days of slavery right up to the modern capitalism, imperialism, and all its forms of oppression.
Sunsara, so why don't you react to that clip and the centrality of the oppression of women and the liberation of women to the emancipation of all humanity?
Well, Andy, watching that, there are two really big things that struck me, that stood out to me. And the first is really the character of the revolution that Bob Avakian is fighting for. This is not a revolution to give people more stuff, just a few reforms within this system. As he was talking about, this is a truly radical, emancipating revolution that's about uprooting thousands and thousands of years of oppression and degradation, including the oppression of women by men, which has just been a brutal reality. For generations and generations, women treated as less than human, property of men, being degraded, abused, violated, treated as less intelligent in so many ways. And this has been internalized, not only by women, but by men who are taught and trained to act this oppression out. So this revolution is about breaking down, as he said, all forms of exploitation and oppression, all forms of degradation, including on the most intimate level, the way that women are treated, gender, sexual relations, as well as in the most macro level. And I just think this is a profoundly radical, emancipating revolution. And the second thing that really strikes me listening to that is where he began in that clip, where he says this has been a lifelong journey for him, a continually deepening process of learning about this oppression and about the centrality of the fight for the liberation of women to this revolution. And that says a lot about Bob Avakian, the person and the revolutionary leader, because he has broken new ground on this. For humanity, in the communist revolution, he's not just built on and continued a liberating tradition, which he has, but he's taken it further and ruptured in important ways with the best of the understanding of revolutionaries, of communists, of anybody on the emancipation of women. And this is something I think we all need to learn from and will be bringing alive in this season.
Yeah, so it's really important for people to see the full answer that this little clip was taken from, and to go to revcom.us and look up what Bob Avakian has written on the question of the liberation of women and its relationship to the emancipation of humanity. It is path-breaking, as you said, and we'll be getting into it more as the season goes on. So let's go to the interview you did with Merle Hoffman.
Merle Hoffman is the CEO and founder of Choices Women's Medical Center in Queens, New York. She is also a longtime fighter for women's reproductive rights. I consider her a very good friend, and we worked very closely together over the last year as co-initiators of Rise Up for Abortion Rights, uniting people from very diverse perspectives to get out in the streets, to raise bloody hell, to stop the Supreme Court from overturning women's right to abortion. Merle Hoffman, welcome back to the RNL, the Revolution Nothing Less show.
Very glad to be with you, Sunsara. Very glad to be. But you have forgotten one thing that you should introduce me as a second-class citizen, because I am a second-class citizen in this country as a woman who has just recently had a fundamental human, civil, moral right ripped away from me by this fascist Supreme Court.
Absolutely. And that actually gets to the first thing I wanted to ask about.
Right.
In just a few days, January 22nd will be the 50th anniversary of the Supreme Court decision in 1973, Roe v. Wade, which first established the constitutional right for women to have an abortion across the country. What does it mean? You already began, but what does it mean now that this has been taken away?
You know, I think it's now 24 states that have either totally banned or on the road to ban legal, safe abortion. And some of them are looking to criminalize it, not only the physicians, but now for the women and anybody who helps. And this right allows women to plan their pregnancies, to have that moral agency to make that decision whether or not they're capable within their families, economically, whatever the reasons are, to bring another child into their family. So this allows them to make the decision.
Yeah, these days you hear a lot of good news proclaimed by so-called leaders of the so-called reproductive rights movement and by Democratic Party strategists, and saying, oh, well, now we can just take the abortion fight to the state. We can, state by state, try to win abortion rights. Never mind, 1/3 of the states have already criminalized abortion, as you said, or banned it in various forms.
Right.
But you had a very important objection to this.
Yes, it's absolutely important. I want people to think about the right, let's say the right to free speech. That you have it in New York, but this is now a states' rights issue. And you travel to New Jersey, and you want to say, I think this Democratic Party is sucks, or whatever you want. And, oh, you can't say that, because if you say anything disparaging about the government in New Jersey, you're going to have to pay a price or a fine or go to, I want you to think about the right to go to wherever you want to worship and not being able to do that in Dakota if you try. This is what it is. So it can't be. There are transcendent rights that have to become above and beyond states and even countries. I mean, so this is a firm belief of mine. And the fact that, there's good news. Yes, 5 referendums passed. That's great. But what you're doing is normalizing the fact that this is now a states' rights issue. But the point is that we can't lose. This is what Rise Up has been pointing out continually. You can't lose sight of the goal, which is that this must be a federal law or written in some way in the blood of all the women who died for this.
You've made the point that abortion is the front line and the bottom line of women's fight for liberation. And you've called the forces attacking abortion the American Taliban. And I think it maybe would be worth it for you to talk about the level of hatred and terror against women that is actually driving this, because I think that gets obscured.
I think it does too. Now, what connects the Taliban, who, as we know, are the most observably and functionally misogynistic power structure on this planet. What connects those with what's going on in this country? And I would say it is this fundamental misogyny. There is really a backlash against what's happened in the last 50 years, where we see women have come into this society in a far stronger way, in more numbers, in terms of being in the professions, being able to express their talents, being able to choose to engage in society. And this is going to push us, which is what I think they wanted, way back. I mean, when you're pregnant and you don't want to have a child and you're forced to have that child, I can't think of anything worse. I mean, you become a bond slave. It's like an animal that's being bred.
The last thing I wanted to ask you, that there was tremendous struggle by women, by other sections of people in the 60s and the 70s that were part of the atmosphere that led to the winning of abortion rights in the first place, and the shattering of the shame that hung over women's sexuality, their lives, their bodies.
Right. Absolutely.
And today people think about supporting pro-choice. For so many people, the farthest limits of their imagination is donating to the Democrats and voting. And I think it'd be helpful to talk some about Rise Up for Abortion Rights. We initiated this together, coming from very different perspectives. People need to struggle. We need resistance. We need to fight. We need to get out of our comfort zone. How do you see the role of that?
Yeah. First of all, and this is really important, we have to fight against, number one, the need for safety. There's a whole philosophy out there that everything has to be in a safe space. People can't be challenged. They have to feel comfortable if they're in a dialogue, if they're in a classroom and somebody might trigger them. I say lean into your trigger. This is not a safe world. It is definitely not safe for women and girls. We're not living in a safe world. So I think we have to face that. We have to look at reality, the narratives that have gone on from the anti-choice people and our opposition for more than half a century, that you're a slut, you're a whore, you're stupid, you're killing your baby. I mean, I don't say you have to say, I'm proud, but every time I speak, and I'll say it again, I had an abortion. It is important that we come out of the abortion closet. What we did with RU and Rise Up, I think, was really a major catalyst and inspirational action. I mean, we got students out. They were walking out of classes. I remember 15-year-olds that never did anything political, that took a microphone and were up there making speeches. I was extremely moved. And then the older women, I mean, we had shared, that platform on one of the rallies. And I remember the older woman who came up with tears to that young woman and said, "I'm so sorry we couldn't keep this for you." So there's all of this rage, you see, and anger and feeling, how could they do that? How do you take that and say, lean into the rage? Don't be afraid. Use that anger because it's a righteous anger. And that's a whole cultural change, Sunsara.
Merle Hoffman, I want to thank you for coming here on the
Thank
Revolution
you.
Nothing Less show, kicking off season 4 with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.